Sorry, I'm starting up the recording so that people who missed can catch up with us. And that takes a second. There we go. Okay, back to us. Thank you. Um, so so you can like prep your meal actually, but you can't prep a meal for after Shabbat. So I can't cut up salad stuff or make tuna because I need it for my Sunday lunch. Um, but so the making of a meal has a lot of exceptions. There's disagreement among the Orthodox, and things have gotten more stringent about like the the Jewish law is full of questions like, can you deboning a fish is not permitted, but if you're about to eat the fish, is it permitted? And so you can be lenient and say, yeah, I mean, you can pull bones out of your fish and eat it, but it would be better if you like have a whole fish that you need to debone, that takes place before Shabbat. So what I'm saying is it's a pretty messy category, but I don't think any of you should be concerned about prepping food because those are fairly obscure discussions. Um, and I think they're intuitive. You know what I mean? If you were really about to be like, I'm not supposed to be cooking, but I can assemble a meal and prep a meal, you probably wouldn't be like, well, let me get out the most complicated thing I need to do. So, good. For cooking, because it comes up all of the time, and because no one that you know who's Jewish will be able to answer this question because they don't know what they're talking about, which is one of the themes of my course, is what does cooking mean in Jewish law? It means cooking something. Uh, what you're allowed to do is something that is already 50%, according to Jewish law. If something is already 50% cooked, you can take it forward from there. And this is something that Jews do not know and they really get wrong. So let's say you have a lasagna that was like kind of half cooked or something. So you can't cook that. You can't put that in the microwave on Shabbat because the cheese hasn't melted yet. Or people have all kinds of things they say about. But the truth is, you can actually use a microwave or a hot plate or um, your stove or oven. You can use heat to bring anything that's at least 50% of the way cooked the rest of the way, and it doesn't count as a violation of cooking. Because I've just seen people really freaky about including me. I mean, frankly, I mean, and people think I'm nuts because I'm way too liberal about this, but that's because they don't read Jewish law. So I remember, I think I told my brother that I don't have a problem with like putting in a waffle like in the toaster on Shabbat, and he was like, "What? Are you kidding me? Put a waffle in the toaster on Shabbat?" And I'm like, "That waffle is pretty much cooked. I mean, I'm not putting batter in the toaster, right?" I'm Meg. You're nodding like you know what. You agree, right?
Well, they're already cooked. Like literally, you could just let them thaw out and they're already cooked. It's not like batter, you know.
I thank you
That's
for
so
giving me a
silly.
second on that. So, but like most Jews, Meg, if I said that from the synagogue bima, people would be like, "I told you, he's not really keeping Jewish law. He's like that rabbi is. He's not a real rabbi." Uh, because they don't know the law. They think, well, you just took something out of the freezer, you put it in the toaster. That's cooking. But so I would just say use your brain. Don't be too worried about the cooking issues. And like I said, I used to be much more concerned. I don't know. You put in an old piece of pizza and you stick, and you're like, oh, but it really kind of recooked and the cheese melted and this and that. No, if you bought a pizza that was already cooked and you're heating it up on Shabbat, don't worry about the cheese melting again. You're doing just fine. So that's the answer why you don't have to worry about like, I don't know. Well, when I heat up my soup on Shabbat in the stock pot, the potatoes are getting softer, so they're cooking more. Yeah, I mean, if you have a raw potato and you're going to cook it from rawness, you just cooked it. But if you have something that was like maybe the potatoes were a little stiff and now they're super soft, that's not cooking. So that's that. It's important because it comes up all the time. Uh, the Orthodox will leave their ovens on all through Shabbat or a hot plate because they don't want to light a fire or in that way. I'm much more lenient about that because uh, I, as a conservative Jew trying to find the middle way, there's also a law that one may not waste energy. It's called al tashrit. Most people pronounce it bal tashrit, which is wrong, but that's okay. But bal tashrit or al tashrit means thou shalt not waste, and it specifically refers to fuel. And it also refers to clothing and furniture in Jewish law, and it's a mitzvah from the Torah. So it's a tough one because clearly leaving an oven on for 26 hours or 25 hours seems to like unnecessarily use energy, and it also can put a house at risk. But you should know that the standard Orthodox practice is to leave something on like that all through Shabbat, so that when you're ready to heat up your soup or you're ready to heat up your leftover pizza, the oven's already on. But I do not do that. I would rather find this middle way where I'm going to turn it on, turn it off, because I'm very sensitive about the environment. And you could say that's a modern concern, but why is it a modern concern if that's actually a rule in the Torah? That's one of the 613 commandments that's already elucidated in the Talmud. So that it's not really a modern concern. It was a concern they had, because you can imagine the fuel oil was concern to them as well. And so crock pots are very common, as it was said, among the Orthodox, and you can often like leave them on, but I wouldn't leave it on. I mean, because again, I used to be that person. Totally up to you about what your practice is, but you should know if they say, well, you have to leave it on, there are other considerations here, especially if it's electricity, because then we're back into the old thing, which is for the Orthodox. It's very important for you to always treat electricity as if it's fire and don't think about it for one more minute. And I think as a conservative Jew, I certainly don't feel bound by that limitation, because it doesn't, electricity is not a form of fire in all of the ways it's been evaluated, even by Orthodox decisors, for the most part, although some of them try to fudge, but the smart ones already know. And so in that sense, using a crock pot or something like that, microwave, is permissible by conservative law, and so this conservative course. So that's the answer to that. So tree, you thought I never get to you. What's something I can't do on Shabbat?
Can't buy, sell, interact in commerce.
And can't do better than that. You nailed it. So for Aharon, Heather, or Larissa, I offer you, you don't have to turn on your screen, but any of you want to jump in with something you can't do on Shabbat?
I have,
Hi. Oh,
go
Wait,
ahead.
I'll start with Heather.
Oh, okay. A statement and a question. I was told you can't do dishes. Does not break my heart. However, it was cleared you can rinse your dishes and put them in the dishwasher, but you cannot run the dishwasher. Personally, as far as work goes, rinsing the dishes is work, pushing a button is not. So why do some think it's okay to rinse the dishes? That's not work. It sure is to me.
So, doesn't everyone love Jewish law at this point? Because of, you get into these interesting questions and answers. Without going back and reviewing the details of the matter, the way my understanding of Jewish law is that you may do the dishes. It's like the food prep that Manisha brought up. You're allowed to do the dishes so you can use them on Shabbat. The problem is they're trying to prevent you from leaving the laws are trying to prevent you from leaving the present moment in order to make a modification for a time that is not on Shabbat. So just like you can build sandcastles on Shabbat because they're not going to last into Sunday or Monday, and but you can't build a sandcastle on Shabbat so that it's there on Sunday, so that people are going to come back tomorrow and be able to look at your sandcastle. Then you shouldn't build it on Shabbat. So the idea is you should be able to be creative in the moment and do what you need for the moment, but not do it for beyond the Shabbat moment. The Shabbat, you're sort of entering the Garden of Eden. And like you shouldn't be worrying about what happens when the Garden of Eden dream is over. And so in that sense, you are permitted to do dishes because you need them for Shabbat lunch or Shabbat dinner. But if the dishes have accumulated over Shabbat, I wouldn't do them. Like yes, you are supposed to kind of like leave them in the sink, if you have like another dish to pull out for your dinner, because otherwise, why are you really doing them? You're really doing them because it stresses you out to have dirty dishes in the sink and you want to have them clean for Sunday. So that's really the question that's involved. The issue about the dishwasher is, again, goes back to the Orthodox considering a use of an electric appliance would be a violation of fire. The other issue around it is that the appliance is specifically boiling water, and there's an issue about how hot you can boil water on Shabbat. You're obviously, I already said you're allowed to heat up things. So you're allowed to heat up water for tea, but boiling is considered maybe too far. So I think that they're trying to prevent you from pressing a button that will cause the boiling of the water in the dishwasher. But it's not like boiling water is not allowed, because obviously you're allowed to use hot water on Shabbat that's coming from the hot water heater. So if the hot water heater is feeding your dishwasher, it's really fine. And so I think you can. So bottom line, I'm with you, Heather, if I'd rather fill my dishwasher than fill my sink. And if it's time for Shabbat dinner and it's July and it's going to be dark in Ann Arbor at 9:30 p.m. and then the dishes, I'd be like, heck, just run the dishwasher and get out the dishes for dinner on Saturday night. But that's the idea. So if you need the dishes for Shabbat, like you need to wash your lettuce for your salad for Shabbat dinner or Saturday dinner, it's fine. But if you're like, no, I'm going to wash my lettuce because I want it for lunch to take to work on Monday, don't do it. Similarly, don't do the dishes if they could wait. Easily wait till after Shabbat. If you can just press the dinner Saturday night, press the button, then wait on pressing the button because you're clearly doing it for the time after Shabbat. So I'm sorry if my
Thank you.
answers are too long. I really do apologize. I hate being long-winded, and I know I am, but I'm telling you, Judaism isn't easy. I wish I could just tell you, just do what feels right in the spirit, but it's not always allowed. You have to kind of figure out the rules here. So Aharon.
You're not allowed to write, but there is some debate if it's on a computer.
Correct. Yeah, so you're not allowed to write. If it is something that is going to be saved by the computer in a way that is really intentional, then that would be writing. If you know something's going to be saved on a computer because, let's say, it's written in the cache, or it's going to be written into short-term memory, you don't worry about that. Does that make sense? Yeah. So like, you don't, because it used to be, you can't use a computer. It's so obvious because it uses a cache on the hard disk, and then that's writing. But, I'll go back to something that came up earlier. When Francie said, the general category is not to modify the world and leave it the way it is. And I was like, well, I'm looking at my screen, and outside my window, I see footprints in the snow. I can't help making footprints. This is a major example in Jewish law. Intentionality counts on Shabbat. And it's really complicated. It still hurts my brain, and I have devoted 100 hours of my life to thinking about this topic. It's a really tough one. So I'm sorry to give you more tough homework here. It's not homework, this moment work. The intentionality of your actions is really important because the rabbis considered things like making footprints in the snow, and more specifically, making indentations in mud. That's their main example. Because one of the primary categories, like writing, you can't do is one cannot plow, right? Because that's pretty much the definition of, if you watch Little House on the Prairie, like I do, it's playing in my next room, my kids are watching it. That's very much definition of work, is like, man, getting out that plow and turning a regular field into something you can plant something in. But the truth is that if you're plowing mud when you walk through it by making footprints, or if you're rolling your wagon, and you're allowed to use a wagon if there's an eruv, which is another topic I can get to in a moment. And so you're making ruts that then things can grow in. So the rabbis say there really is an issue of intentionality, and that if you are intending, if it's an unintentional consequence of something you're doing that is a violation of Shabbat or a modification of the world, you don't have to worry about it. And so that the category of writing to screen, or writing to a piece of digital memory, or writing to a hard drive. Clearly, to me, although there are people who disagree with me, but there are a lot of people who agree with me, it's in that category, which is if your intention is to start a Google document on Shabbat, and oh, I can't believe it, my Google document's still there after Shabbat. No, come on. You knew that. You knew that when you were doing it. You knew you were writing a document and that writing was being saved. You should worry about that because you're just playing a game. Your intentionality was, I know this is being saved. If it really is an accidental consequence of something you're doing without that intention, then it's permitted. So I think that the cache is acceptable, but straight up writing would not be. So that's the issues of like in electronics. Is it writing in the sand? Is it or you intention, or is your intention to save it? I'll mention the Eruv because we didn't talk about it last time, and it affected one of the people in the class, and so I felt bad about that. Uh,
Can I ask something before we move on
please,
about this?
Francie, of course.
What is the stance on electronics? Because then a computer is an electronic, right? So I don't know, then that does that not count?
So the stance on electronics is it falls that electricity. This is my view. It's a conservative view. It's not the orthodox view. And the orthodox view is it's a separate matter. Electricity is not fire. So the fact that something uses electricity does not make it prohibited. But what would make it prohibited is either you use it for a prohibited purpose, or it chases away the spirit of Shabbat. And both of those are real categories. So, you can use a computer, but if you're writing a document that you're saving, like on a Google document, and you're going to click save, then that's a violation of writing, because it's a similar thing to like writing on a piece of paper. You can't garden on Shabbat, so I can't mow my lawn even though I use an electric mower. So you can't use electric appliances to do things that are forbidden. So if I'm not allowed to sew, I can't use an electric sewing machine and just say, well, it's electric. I've actually had people in my synagogue say stuff like that to me. Rabbi, I didn't know electricity was okay. Now I mow my lawn. Or I didn't know electricity was okay. Now I literally had someone, Meg, tell me this last year. Oh, so now I can cook on Shabbat. Because I'm like, no, it's not the cooking is a forbidden category. So, I mean, cooking something from 0 to 100 is forbidden. You can cook something only from 50 to 100, 50% to 100%. So the answer is you can't use electric appliances to do things that are otherwise forbidden. And then there's a completely different category. As I told you, it's the category of, for example, can you read an assignment for school on Shabbat? Clearly, reading is not only permitted, but encouraged on Shabbat. But is it different if it was an assignment for school? And then the answer is either you yourself or you ask your rabbi. It's either me or a different rabbi. If you want to choose another rabbi to be your rabbi, that's permissible. But you should either, I mean, for the Orthodox answer is ask your rabbi. Your rabbi decides. For conservative, it's like, I'm happy to allow you to decide, or I'm happy to answer it with you. Is it chasing away the spirit of Shabbat? So, I don't know, Meg, tell me a course you're taking right now.
Forensic anthropology.
Okay, have you been assigned some reading?
Oh yeah, loads of reading.
So does it chase away the spirit of Shabbat to read it or not? I'm genuinely curious.
For me, it doesn't, because it is a subject that I am really interested in. I feel passionate about it. And so I derive enjoyment from doing my assigned readings. However, if it were for like my science class, I probably wouldn't do that reading on Shabbat. It's less enjoyable and it feels like work.
Yeah. And thank you. And that's the issue of like Shabbat Shalom. Like what is we say Shabbat Shalom because Shabbat's supposed to be this sort of entering into the Garden of Eden at a place of peace. And so I agree. I mean, I approached my reading different, and I still do. I approach my reading differently. So, for example, I just got out Edmund, you know, Edmund Wilson died, the great Darwinian scholar. I was thinking about doing a sermon on him. So I want to use that for something in the future. That's like cooking for the future, doing my dishes for the future. But if I pull it out on a Saturday afternoon, I'm not just, I really do approach it differently. I'm not just going to read this being like, can I find a quote for my future sermon? Can I find a quote for, and on a Tuesday, I might do that. If it's a Tuesday, I might be like, you know, he died. I want to say something at services. I need to find a quote. That's more so. But on other people, like, you know what? I never really got a chance to read Edmund Wilson. So I'm going to sit back and get my cup of coffee, have my cat jump on my lap, and read the book. So for me, that's the difference. And I love reading on Shabbat because I literally approach it with a different spirit. The same thing with walking. I mean, can you take a walk on Shabbat? Of course, but you know, it's different than being like, I got to walk from point A to point B. Exercise is a question on Shabbat. I think that there's a lot of debate about whether, and I don't want, here I am, I'm bringing up the most controversial categories. So I feel terrible. I'm like, here it's an intro class. And I'm like, oh yeah, you know, let's pick the most obscure topic and figure out what the answer is. But I would say that athletics and exercise is also in this kind of electricity complicated place, which is, it's not about exertion. It's because I told you, the issue about work is, as Francie said, it's about creative artisanship. It's about modification. It's about creative. It's about modifying work. You're not. I don't. You know. Well, you're modifying your muscles. No, that's not the way we. That's not. That's not Jewish law. Like don't get. You can get crazy. You can say anything about anything. It's the issue of like, so going for a jog, going for a run, exercising, playing tennis. The question really is it bringing the spirit of Shabbat or not? If you're working out because you're trying to make it to the Olympics and it's work, then I wouldn't do it. Then it's not Shabbat for you because you're like, I'm not good enough unless I put in these hours. You know, I'm just not good enough. My body is not good enough. Then you're modifying your body for the wrong reason. But if you're, you know, we have a member, I know Meg knows. Sorry, Meg is like my right arm at synagogue. She is my ritual assistant. She's my engagement director. She's my program director. So we work sort of tied together. There's someone I wish were coming to services to read Torah. She's an amazing, amazing Torah reader. But she does her run at that time. And she like trains for biathlons and triathlons. And my attitude is, well, if you're doing it because if you don't train, you're not good enough, then it's a violation of Shabbat. But if you're running along the Huron River while we're on shul and you're like listening, you're watching the butterflies, listening to the birds, and listening to your favorite tunes, I'm not one to say that's not in the spirit of Shabbat. That could well be in the spirit of your Shabbat. So that's that. So I know about the salmon. Absolutely. This is ridiculous. My favorite restaurant in all of Washtenaw County is Dabu Sushi at Ypsilanti. And like when we save up our pennies, we get salmon teriyaki. I just throw out the teriyaki sauce and I bring the salmon home. And then my cat just sits there and stares at me. And he eats like $8 worth of my $20 salmon because they only give you a piece this big, but it's delicious. And I just can't help it. You know, so yeah. And then when I buy him like the cheapo, like frisky salmon, he's like, I'm not eating that. I don't even know what that is. Like just walks away, sticks his butt in my face. So I understand when you're eating the good salmon, the cats come calling and irresistibly. So,
I have a
yeah,
question.
go ahead, Emma.
Well, first of all, I love how we have cats that are just like showing up in the videos and stuff. But I do have a question. Have you like been told in like the past that sometimes like that you're like too liberal like with what you think, even like for conservative Judaism?
Yeah, I mean, conservative Judaism has a fairly like, yes, I would say that I lean toward the overly permissive. I mean, it's not overly permissive. That's my own language.
I mean, I feel like to an Orthodox person it'd be overly permissive. But...
Yeah, right. No, so I take lenient positions.
Oh, okay. Yeah, it's interesting because I like went on a Shabbaton to Southfield, and it was like a very like Hasidic community, and like I was seeing like, oh, they had like Shabbat lights that they would turn on before, and then you can close them to shut the light off. you know, and they didn't like tear toilet paper. What's your
Right.
thought on like tearing things?
I say my attitude is that the issue of tearing, so like remember that the Orthodox approach is not really looking at the nature of the law.
Mm-hmm.
It's trying to create a certain kind of community.
Mm-hmm.
It's trying to create a culture.
Yeah, I
And
feel like it's really hard to be Orthodox if you didn't live in an
correct.
Orthodox community.
Exactly. So what they want to do, and there's nothing wrong with it, and in fact, they may end up being the most correct, but they're not correct about Jewish law. What they may be the most correct about is social engineering, which is they may say, look, the best way to be Jewish is to adopt a stringent way of living that means you're really only with other Jews. So, for example, you cannot eat food out. I will argue later in the course that you can eat food at a regular restaurant. But imagine if I said, you can't eat at a regular restaurant, then where are you going to be eating? You're going to be eating with other Jews and socializing with other Jews. If I say you cannot drive an electric car to synagogue, you have to live within a block or two of synagogue, then you are going to be really close with other Jews who are all claiming all of the apartments and
Yeah.
houses within 2 blocks. And I've lived in these communities, as you have, which I totally respect. And so then, like, who are you going to socialize with on Shabbat? It's only going to be other Jews because everyone else is breaking Shabbat.
Right.
And so that they're at it, and socializing. I mean, just it means like you're not going to fall in love with people who aren't Jewish because you're only meeting people who are Jewish. And so
Yeah.
what they've done is they're about like, look, to be Jewish means to live in a Jewish culture. And similarly, you might say to be Navajo means to live on the reservation. Like this business of being Navajo, but you live in LA and go to Berkeley, like you ain't Navajo. And so like, and there's a reason they look really down largely at the way maybe I live is there's a social piece to it that like, look, you're not being infused with the spirit of Judaism if you're not in a very closed community that has high walls around it. And as I've mentioned before, it's a choice about what it really means to be Jewish. We have those same debates outside of Judaism. What does it really mean to be black? I mean, trust me, those debates are really happening. You know, are you really black if you go to Princeton and sing in the Glee Club and all your friends are white? You know, and then the debate is, sure you are, because the rest of, you know, the police still view you as black. You know, so, but then there are other blacks who are like, I don't know, that seems like you've really embraced whiteness. You know, so that these debates go on all around about what it means to be part of a group and have a group identity.
Yeah.
And so for halacha, the answer, like what I always argue, and ad nauseum, and it'll in this course, I know it goes a lot, is that this isn't really a decision about keeping Jewish law. This is a decision about using the most stringent of the Jewish laws to maintain a certain kind of life. Just as it
Yeah.
might be, right? And it might be like, let's say, I don't know, let's say we are Navajo, right? Then the question is, can you go to public school or do you have to go to a Navajo school? Right? I mean, Jewish law doesn't say you can't go to public school, but then the rabbi of the Orthodox community may say, no, you may not go to public school.
Well, there's like an expectation. Well, I'm in the reason why I'm asking and how I was able to go on the Shabbaton and everything is I'm taking a Maimonides class at the Jewish Resource Center. And I know that like part of the intention of the class is to proselytize within Jews to get Jews to be more Orthodox and things. And like as a person who's like not Jewish, you know, like they all know that, and I'm not getting paid to go to this class or anything like that. I literally am going because I want to learn. And I think like there was a class where they were talking about like how, you know, each generation there's less and less Jews unless you're in like Hasidic Jewish observance, and like in my head I'm like, okay, so you're taking your kids to yeshiva schools, you're only ever exposing them to Jewish people. Like if they intend to live in that community for like the rest of their lives, like I don't know, it was just like a lot. And as a person who's like not Jewish too, it's like I would ask questions and sometimes they'd be like, oh, it's different for non-Jews, and I'm like, but I kind of want to know the answer though. So it's like, I don't know, it's interesting to see like different perspectives, but I do know a lot of like people that like went to college and became more Orthodox and then they moved back home and decided to like move into those communities because it was easier and there was an eruv and all of these things. Like
So, and so, you know, what I say, and I mean it very, very sincerely, is that when someone on the fundamentalist side of a spectrum says, this is what Jewish law says, or this is what Catholicism says, or this is what Sharia says, right? That I would just caution you, having taught this at San Jose State in my previous career as an academic, they asked me to teach like a world religions kind of class. And what I told them, I was like, can I teach something a little bit more contemporary than like the not shoplifting, what do I call it? Window shopping class? And they said, what do you want to teach? And I said, I want to teach fundamentalisms and liberalisms in religious perspective, so that I was looking at fundamental, because it's fundamentalist strains in Christianity, also liberal strains throughout history, and so what I would say is that don't believe it when they tell you that, yeah, what Jesus really was against was homosexuality. My God, all day long, and so if he showed up today, you'd be like, oh my God, the queerness, like put an end to it, right? And you're like, well, yeah, I think we all know that. And I'm like, well, then why is it a preoccupation of the Catholic Church? So like, I wouldn't believe that the Orthodox are the most correct about Jewish law, but then that's not the point, right? The question is, think of it as diversity. There is a way to live Christianity in a very right-wing Catholic way, right? There's a way to live Christianity in a very left-wing socialist progressive way. And and I'm into diversity. Which spirit speaks to you? And then where does your soul feel at home? Rather than saying, one is correct and one's wrong. So Rav Nadav says they're wrong about their interpretation of electricity. And they say Rav Nadav is wrong about just about everything. Forget about right and wrong. No, really. I mean, because I engage too much I'm too much into accuracy. I mean, if you came to my Jewish law session yesterday afternoon, I had a good time, for the people who came. It's like, wow, I thought you were just doing it wrong, Rav Nadav. And now I realize, aren't the Orthodox doing it wrong? The law is pretty clear. And I was like, okay, so I'm into that. I'm right. They're wrong. They're right. I'm wrong. But the truth is, that's only if you have an interest in what the law really says. That's only if you have an interest, But the truth is, let your heart speak. So that, I've lived Orthodox for a while. And what they're really saying is, do you want to live as a Black person this way? Do you want to live as an Indigenous person this way? I think you can be an Indigenous person who lives a very different life than a certain kind of progressive vision of what Indigenousness needs to be. I also think you can be a person who lives a very specific kind of Indigenous life according to a very specific definition of a certain progressive way of living. And that's legitimate too. So I say, let your heart speak to you. And it will.
Yeah,
And
that's what I.
it's like, yeah, and so let it be like, forget about, there's the old expression, but it's true. Do you want to be right or do you want to be happy?
Yeah,
We all want it both ways. But for you, when it comes to Judaism, I want you to be able to say, where does my spirit sing? In what kind of Jewish community?
yeah,
And then in this class, and I'll go back to you, Eva, but in this class, and that's very important, I'm going to assume, because you're with me and you're in a conservative class, that you're not trying to learn what is it to be right about Judaism, although I use that language because I'm fighting for it. I'm assuming that you're going to live a certain kind of life like what conservative Jews are choosing to live, which is, I want to live an authenticity of traditional Judaism in a way that allows me to live, obviously, a modern life. And not just allows me to, but that's who I am. I mean, so how am I going to live Shabbat if I'm not living in an apartment building with Orthodox families who are knocking on my door saying, hey, you want to come over for Shabbos lunch? Right? And so how do I live Shabbat if I'm not in that situation? But then there are people who tell me that's the only way to keep Shabbos. And I'm like, if that sings in your heart, then you should go and live in Jerusalem or live at the Chabad house or live in a community where that's it. And you really should. But, so for me, it's like I've lived in those communities and it's beautiful. But my heart's okay. like I guess, sending my kids to public school. I just like, and my heart. So that in that sense, I just want to say this course in a way is to say, I want you to be able to live an authentic Judaism, but if but not necessarily one that requires a closed community. Okay, back to you.
Yeah, so like I've had a lot of like internal kind of dialogue going on when like attending this class and then like going to Maimonides and things too. Is like I mean, I feel like the identity as a convert is often like looked at in a strange light in Orthodox spaces, especially. And because they're like the next question will be like, how did you convert? You know? Um, but like I don't know. I definitely like when discussing especially like Kabbalism and things like that, that's some stuff that's like really, at least for me, really interesting. And like for me, it's like I know that like I'm never gonna like feel truly like included in like those types of spaces, but I don't know. It's just it's helping to like get exposure to many different types of like Judaism as well.
Yeah, and I think that
And I definitely
I,
think they look at the Torah and like the Talmud and like the Mishnah and the Gemara and all that as like very like, this is what God wrote for you.
right.
Like
The
exactly,
only,
you know?
the only issue is to remember, but they're also saying that the decisions we've made
Yeah.
about which parts to look at
Yeah.
and which parts to know, and often, they're very specific. One of the things that really turned me off from Orthodox is I went to Israel to live there for a year after my master's degree, and in Jewish studies. And so I went to Israel, and I thought I would study at yeshiva, like an English-speaking yeshiva. So I looked at a couple of them, and their syllabus was we read Maimonides, chapter 3, chapter 8, chapter 9, chapter 10, chapter 12. And I'm like, oh, how about the other ones? You're not allowed to read the other ones, right? And I'm like, what do you mean I'm not allowed to read the other ones? This, so for example, let's say on the session we did yesterday, this is the right way to do this. And they'll quote the decisor who says that. Well, how about all of the other rabbis who disagreed with that and who said that was the minority position? You don't read that, right? So it's like, or Kabbalah. This is what we're going to read. We're going to read the following from the Tanya, and it's going to say this. And then you're like, how about other Kabbalah? You don't read that. So like, it is a way of saying, we want to immerse you in the culture that is supporting this form of life. And it's really, and it can be very, very deep, but how about the other things? I mean, how about the other part of it? I mean, like I used to go to Chabad. I mean, I don't want to ruin it for you. Like, but there were signs for me that it wasn't for me. Like, I love Kabbalah. So I need the freedom to read it all. I need that freedom, and then, like, it came up this morning in something. So it's on my mind that, I remember I was studying, with a Chabad rabbi about, some Kabbalah, Jewish mysticism. It was talking about the soul, and it was really, really meaningful. And then, like I noticed kind of on the page, well, non-Jews don't have the Jewish part of their soul. So I was like, okay, what does that mean? What is the non-Jew missing? Well, they're missing
The Pintel Yid.
Yeah, like they're right. The Pintel Yid. There are other things also. They're different. This is all over different parts of Chassidut. So okay, I actually had read Aristotle, so I knew where most of the Kabbalah was coming from because it's based on Neo-Aristotelianism. Because Aristotle had divided up the soul. You have your vegetative soul, which doesn't. It sounds bad, but it's beautiful. It's like, well, better word for vegetative soul. It sounds like I'm in a vegetative state, right? It's like no. It's actually it's the part of you that does share with the tree. It's like this part of you that's like, oh, it's great. I mean, like you're part of your nefesh that's like soaking in nourishment and is growing and goes toward the light and is alive in the moment. So you've got this part and there's like an inorganic part of your soul, like you're made up of bones and chemicals that come together to be part of life, like proteins. It's incredible. And then you've got the animal part of your soul, which you share with all the animals. And then for Aristotle, you have the human part of your soul, which is like reason. But this gets changed in Kabbalah so that, and especially in Hasidism, where it's kind of like non-Jews don't have that human part of their soul. So like non-Jews have mostly the animal part of their soul. And so like I was learning this with Rabbi and, in a class, and I was like, okay. And so like, wait, what? So they're like animals, and the rabbi, don't worry about it, right? Well, I worry about it. And then I did worry about it because then the Israeli ambassador came to visit San Diego, and only the head rabbis were allowed to meet with him, and that included me. And then the Chabad rabbi stood up and said, well, the Palestinians are animals, so they can be rounded up and put in and they can be put on, literally. I don't understand why we're not solving the crisis by rounding up all of the millions of Palestinians. And he said, and the typical word is dogs. They're dogs, and they have dog souls. And I know where they get this. So I just have to say, like, I know what text they're using. And so they're not making, Rabbi, there's a form of speech. They're like a Trumpian. They're just kind of exaggerating. No, this is part of stuff I found beautiful. But then I realized, like, there's an ugly side to it, which is, well, if they don't have human souls, they have mostly animal souls. And then they have bad animal souls because they have dog souls, which I love dogs, but these bad dogs. And then they can be rounded up, and they can be, and they don't have reason like we do, and they don't have morality like we do. So I was like, look, and wow, I mean, you know how I feel, like I know I'm often, like something that's beautiful just got really ugly, right? And so I need to be I need to be a broader thinker than that. I need to be able to read all of it and ask all the questions I want to ask and understand all of it before I fall in love with it a little too much. So that was for me. Like, I want to be able to study Kabbalah. I want to be able to read books. I want to be able to do that. But I pay a price. And I just want to say, like, I acknowledge, Ava, and it'll come up in this course, which is you pay a big price for not being an Orthodox Jew. The price you pay, forget acceptance in their community. That's certainly the case. You pay the price for not having a community. Like you pay, like, and that's just simple. I mean, people will say to me, wow, I stopped at your synagogue, Rav Nadav. I didn't get a single invitation home for lunch. Like, that's weird. On Shabbos, and no one invited me home for lunch to hang out. In an Orthodox community, you would. And I just feel like, yeah. But you know what we do have? We eat lunch together at the synagogue. It's not the same thing, but it's pretty amazing. I mean, and when I was a grad student, I would go to synagogue. All my professors would be at the synagogue. A lot of my professors, a lot of other people I met, and we'd hang out at synagogue and eat a long lunch, and it was kind of cool. I met people I wouldn't have met, and I talked to people I want to talk to. The Orthodox style is you get an invitation to a home. We're a real community. You're eating in someone's home and at their table. We're really, really close, and we all live nearby. And the conservative thing is, no, people are driving, but we're going to make an amazing kosher lunch and sit here and get to know each other. It's two very different cultures. And there's a lot of loss with embracing a conservative culture. I just think there is. When was the last time someone tapped me on the shoulder at a conservative synagogue and said, you seem like a really interesting guy. Do you want to do learning together? Why don't we read through Rambam's? I've been invited to do this in Orthodox places. Nadav, you seem like a smart guy. I've never really read Rambam. Why don't we read it together? Get together for an hour a week and read together. When are you free? I've never gotten that invitation at a conservative synagogue, and I feel terrible about it. I'm the rabbi of one. I've talked to Meg about, like, we're going to start that system. So, like, we have, but it's not built in. You know what I mean? In an Orthodox, it would be built in. Or, why don't you come over for dinner tomorrow night? I have someone for you to meet and marry. You know what I mean? Like, when you're single, not so bad to meet some people that way. I'm not going to tell you who you should marry. And so, like, I couldn't live with myself. I told you the wrong person. So, and so, like, it's different. And so I just want to say there's a lot of loss with the kind of Judaism I'm presenting to you because it doesn't have a built-in system. And I've watched a built-in community that's small and that's tight, and there's something really beautiful about that. I think that's why people join sororities and fraternities and things like that. Like, you want to have sisters and brothers right off the bat. And so it's different. And I've probably gone on too long about that, but I'm just reading in the chatter. I hope you don't mind that Francie said, I really want to echo what has been discussed before about authenticity. I think living true to yourself is more spiritual than performing as a way to be included, and just my humble opinion. And so like I really am saying that different people's characters and temperaments fit in different places better. And I really do understand that for a lot of Jews, an Orthodox community, it fits better with what they need and what they're looking for. And I admit that you got stuck. However, I mean, got stuck. I hope you feel honored or happy to be studying with me. But like, I've always been a seeker and a searcher, you know. And I read Buddhism, and I'm like, I really like this, but then whatever happened to, like, you know, I don't want to just tell the poor person on the street life is short and be attached to impermanence. Like I like, I'm really concerned about social ills, and I care about global warming. So like I can't quite, you know, I can't quite live my life reading Thich Nhat Hanh and you know, and just being vegetarian. Like there's more to it. So like for me, I'm a seeker. I need to be authentic. I need to be open. I feel like there's nothing human that's alien to me. When I was in the Orthodox community I lived in, that I loved, and I received gifts that I can't receive outside of it, like we said. But there was also an incredible lack of interest in global issues facing society. I mean, if you ever wanted a Shabbat conversation to go nowhere, let Nadav say, you know, I'm reading a book about global warming. It's like, boring, you know, irrelevant, you know, the feelings of animals and factory farming. Oh God. I'm leaving lunch right now. See you later, guys. You know, so like I realized, wow, you know, like, but at the same time, there was a community, so his community had no interest in inequity, inequality in society. Um, you know, I mean, every issue I care about, but it was a community in which, like, if you were sick or if someone you knew were sick, everybody's cooking chicken soup right now. We're dividing it up, meal trains happening. And right now, I mean, like, you could get sick, I wouldn't even know, right? And then be like, Nadav, you know, God forbid you get sick, but like maybe it's like I did post it on Facebook or on my Instagram, and I'm like, you know, like we're all so disconnected and pretending to be connected that, you know, you wouldn't get that. So it's a community that really, really, it was so tight, really cared about each other, loved each other. And then I just realized, though, for me, like, I literally need to feel like I feel like the prophets are telling me to worry about the whole world, you know, not just the people I know. So like that was a big issue for me. And I admit sometimes the questions I asked were like, I wish he hadn't asked that. And so like I can't live that way. So I'm giving you a Judaism that's trying to give you, on some level, to be frank, you know, something of a little bit of the way I live. And it really may not work for you. And I'm totally sensitive to that. That's why I'm like hyper conscious of that. So for me, what would it mean to keep Shabbat, keep kosher, and you're living in wherever you're living? You know, not all of you are in Ann Arbor, or you're living in San Diego, or I'm living in Boston, or I'm living where all of San Francisco, or I'm living in in a rural area outside some of the places I've lived. And it's like, what would it mean for me to keep Shabbat? What it would mean for me to date a non-Jew like Lynn, or like my ex-fiance, and I'm keeping Shabbat? What does that look like? And I'm keeping kosher. What does it look like when I meet her family? What does it look like when I do holidays? So you're kind of getting the image of, to me, what does it mean to be a conservative Jew? I think it allows you to really embrace authenticity. Like, I really want to know what the sources say. I really want to read the whole book. I want to, and those things just blow my mind. Like, I'm so elevated, and my life is changed by, you know, by bringing in serious Judaism and serious spiritual and religious practice. No, you know, like I don't want to be handed a prayer book that's half the prayer book. I want to be handed the whole prayer book. I also don't want to just speed through it and pretend everyone read it at every service and we're out in half an hour. Like, you know, like, so I'm the in between. Like, don't give me the prayer book that's been gutted because you made decisions about what's relevant. I want the whole authentic traditional prayer book. Then again, I don't think we need to pray every page every day. Like, I think it's okay to be like, you know what, we're going to highlight this today, highlight that tomorrow. And then we're also going to have a lot of silent time during prayer where you pick what's speaking to you. And so today might be the day you close your eyes and have your personal prayer with God. Today may be the day where you're lingering on page 93. And so we're going to have lots of quiet time for you to have your own interactions, be praying what you need to pray. But I want the authenticity of the whole prayer. I want the rabbi to be able to tell me, you know, what was the context for that prayer? You know, what are some of the literary things in it I should be paying attention to? You know, why is this? Which brings me to a new topic. Oh my gosh, I shouldn't do that. But it came up organically, and so I'm looking 157. I'm gonna take a break from Shabbat for a second. We are coming back to it. I have an assignment for y'all. I've never done this before in a conversion class. So there's this book. Is that backwards? Okay, you can see it. Like it says, these are the words. Thanks. So it is on my syllabus for the first time ever. And you can get it for like $1. It is, these are the words
Or
is,
for free from Ron Sussman.
or,
He gives them out.
so what it does is it just has these little mini chapters, and they're just a key Hebrew word. I just opened up randomly. The word bracha, blessing. Words like you should probably know in the original Hebrew. And then you realize these are the key words. What does the word mean? Like, what's it really mean? Why is it an important word? So what I would like is that everybody in the class, at each class, we either have a few of us or all of us, but maybe just a few each time, that we sign up for words. Meg, maybe you could make me like a Google Doc sign up sheet or something that we all share. It doesn't have to be a sign up sheet, but people could say, you could pick the word you want to do. So you could say, I'm going to present the word bracha, blessing, which is page 78. Someone else could say, I'm going to present the word matzah, matzah. And I'm going to tell you a little bit, like, it's not just, yeah, matzah is unleavened bread. Why is matzah important? Why is it like part of the most beautiful, like, wisdom, religion, tradition ever on earth? Like matzah is key. Like it wouldn't have been in this book if it wasn't. I'm going to do matzah. What's the Tanakh? And why is the Tanakh not the same as the Torah? Right? So this is a great book. I love it. Like, you know, I'm going to present Ne'ilah. What is Ne'ilah? It's a unique service. There's no other evening service like it. It's very, very special. And so, like, what is it? So, and you can just tell us, like, in a sentence. I'm not asking for a book report. I mean, not a sentence. You know, you can tell us in 2 minutes. And tell us, you know, so, like, I would love it if, and you can pick the words you want to do. Just pick a word, put it on the Google Sheet. Meg will link to it from the web page. And so that I don't care if 2 people present the same word. I mean, you might have a word like Shekhinah, God's presence, and you might, and Tree may say, I really want to do that word, Shekhinah. I've heard it before. God's presence, what is it? And Francie may say, I want to do that word too. And that's fine, because you can give your take on it. But in general, if you put down which word you're doing, or you can pick a couple of words to do through the course, I would love it. Give you guys, that would be a great icebreaker. Like this week, I chose this word. And now I'll go back to Judaism. I know, like, today we're doing kind of Orthodox and conservative. I know it comes up a lot just because I know that that's sort of, when you're entering Judaism, you have to understand, what tribe am I joining? Like, what culture am I joining? And my culture, conservative culture, is not the same as everything else. Conservative culture is we eat together at the synagogue and our kids play in the playground. Orthodox culture is you're coming home with me and you don't have a choice, right? And when I take a nap, you're going to watch my kids. And it's beautiful and wonderful and interesting. I remember when I was visiting Israel at one point in the 2000s, I ran into someone I had met earlier. She was younger. She'd gone to Israel. She was kind of a hippie type, and she's kind of gone to Israel to maybe visit a boyfriend or something like that, and crash with some friends and see the sights. And then, like, 2 months later, she was living an Orthodox life. Like, and she was like, you know, like, forget my degree. I'm working on my challah recipe. I have, like, the best gal friends I've ever had in my life. You know, and I'm like, she was going to be married by 23, you know, and it fit her. Do you know what I mean? Like, she was in love. and it was so orthodoxy. And she's like, oh, like, is Lynn with you? Because I want like to introduce Lynn to the girls. And I'm like, yeah, well, Lynn and I are going to services. And she is like, oh, services aren't for girls, like you go to services and send Lynn to us so we can have a good time and play, and hang out and do stuff. And I was like, no, like, I think Lynn wants to go to synagogue with me, so like it's just a different culture, and it's awesome, and it has vitality, and it's not racist or anything like that. Like, I mean, for women who say, I like the gender roles here, and or whatever it is, I like I see women that I see myself becoming, then that's a beautiful thing. So I would just say that. But then for me, for Lynn's like, is it okay if I don't want to go with her and do that stuff with them? And I was like, are you sure you don't want to try? And so she's like, I'll go. And then she came back, she's like, yeah, it was really weird. Like, we went out to a settlement, and like, I'd never been to a settlement, but they were like, go settlements. And I don't think I'm go settlements. And I was like, I'm glad you had that experience, and, but I do love their clothes. So like, I mean, they're beautiful, like, Shabbos scarves, and so, and then she's like, yeah, you just don't want to know where they were made. So, but, like, you should have these experiences, experience the different pieces of Judaism, experience reform. I know we haven't talked about that, Reform Judaism. They'll give you a prayer book that has prayers removed, and shorter services, and much more performative. Like, if we're going to have a service, then it should be sung correctly, preferably by a professional, maybe
I
with the
always kind
choir.
of I always kind of found that like modern Orthodoxy was really interesting too. It was like in Chicago, there's like a pretty large modern Orthodox community in Skokie, and that's where I got like my mezuzah, and we ate at Emma's Deli or bakery, I think, and all of that. And that was really interesting. Is that like they're within these communities, but flipping on and off the lights. Sometimes they'll like some families will do that and some don't, and other things. So there's like a lot of ranges to observance and to what you believe like following the laws are, and whether it's all of them or some of them.
My experience of modern Orthodoxy is it's a very vibrant, relatively small but vibrant community, but in metropolitan areas, mostly in Chicago, New York, Los Angeles, and then Boston. And so, like, and if you find yourself in a major city, it can very much work to check it out. Like, definitely very vibrant, and I love the vibrant community. But it starts to thin out really quickly when you get out of those cities. I mean, even in major cities like San Francisco, I didn't see a lot going on, and then other places where like there were modern Orthodox communities, they have been very much affected by the move toward fundamentalism all around us. So, like, I mean, like I said, I mean, the community I'm often talking about is the Palo Alto community in Silicon Valley, and the Palo Alto Orthodox Minyan. And and there was a lot of vibrancy, but then, the rabbi who came in was like, you guys are all way too lenient. You have to be much more, stringent on everything. And it was weird because also he had grown up secular, and he'd become like Orthodox after college by, getting involved in Orthodox community with like Aish Torah and stuff like that. We're kind of like trying to, which, to me is like semi-cultish, and so then he's like, so, and it was all like, oh, he's cool. He was an English major at University of Chicago. And I'm like, he ain't cool now, because he's like yelling at all of us who like been living it, like how we're, we, only get the toothpaste with the hechsher on it, and I went to all of his Talmud sessions and things like that, and I don't know, it felt very important at the time. And then but I can't remember anything I learned. I can't remember one sermon. It's like, oh, it's about Rashi and Chazal, and they say this and that, and it all felt like, wow, this is so authentic. But then I have to ask myself, did any of it really affect my real life? Like, did I ever hear a sermon that was, besides telling me to like not buy toothpaste without a hechsher on it, like, did I ever hear something that helped me know like who to marry, help me know how, like, did I ever anything about Shabbat except don't push a stroller? Did ever that kind of thing? Like, I mean, you never would have heard a sermon like I gave yesterday. I mean, like a sermon about like trying to really understand sewing as an act of love and blah 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 blah. I mean, it was all, but it all felt really like, I'm getting something really rich. So that it was a different kind of thing. So reform tends to be much more social actiony, and my hat's off to them. I mean, they're much more likely to be, I mean, it can get a little old for me, but a lot of social action sermons, so it can end up just kind of being the latest flavor of progressivism around, um, and a little bit performative in that regard. Then again, I'm probably not doing enough to help the world, and so last thing I want to do is point a finger at them saying they're doing too much, or they're being performative while they're doing it. So, basically Reform Judaism tends to be much more like the service is performed for you. Their observance is non-existent, and very much a focus on social action and on having like I don't know I'm trying to think of great examples. So like I was kind of in awe once. I heard a Reform rabbi give like the big sermon of the year on voting rights. I'm like, that's a pretty important topic. And so I was kind of like, that's awesome. Like this is really, really relevant. There's probably nothing more important than that. But I wouldn't give my big Yom Kippur sermon of the year on voting rights. It just, to me, that's what I read on the New York Times page every day. That's what I hear on CNN and MSNBC. I don't need that to be the most holy day of the year for me to be told about that. I mean, as Meg and those who come to, and Manisha might have heard, like I've given pretty big, powerful sermons on gerrymandering, which I think is like one of the worst things in the world. And I connect it with the part of the Torah that talks about apportioning the land. What does it mean to have different districts in the land of Israel? And there's a lot in the Torah about what does it mean to have rights to have representation, in the community. But yeah, so like that would be an example, which is on the one hand, I'm like, if you're a social justice warrior, you probably want to hear more from your rabbi at synagogue on the big days about those issues. And I totally respect that. I really, really respect that. Then that's where you belong. But, you're going to hear something a little different from me. I'm going to give you something for high holy days for me. If I've got actually I have 7 big sermons, but so, that's why I need another rabbi. They could just take 3 off my hands. But let's say I have my 4 biggest sermons, like you're going to hear one, like Meg and I co-led one of the big sermons this year. And it was on people who choose to be child free, and like, where are they? Are they being included in our society? Are they being treasured and valued? Aren't they our teachers? Aren't they like some of them are our rabbis? The best rabbi I knew in San Diego, don't tell anyone, was someone who she and her husband were childless, but they decided not to adopt. And they basically devoted their whole lives to the community. Every straggler, every person, brought everyone into their home. That was their family, so like, where are we at with that? So that was something, I didn't do voting rights. But you're not going to hear about where we at with including people who choose not to have children, who are many of whom are spiritual and moral examples, and yet we make them feel like second or third class citizens. You won't see that on MSNBC. So like, I just felt like that was something we can do as a community, that we can Meg, don't ever say I said this. We can lean into. Sorry, overused expression, like you got this. But we can lean into. Other things we can lean into, I'll talk about. And I will give you one that's completely personal, which is, where are you dealing with loss in your life? How are you dealing with growing up? Like, are you growing up? Like, are you where you need to be? And someone else would be like, my mom used to say, you always give one psychobabble sermon. I wish you didn't do that. And now those are her favorite. Now she's like, oh my God, that thing you said about like, what happens when you realize your old goals in life are not your goals? I totally get it. And I'm like, you used to tell me I was Dr. Phil. Now you're like, that's your favorite sermon? Like, what, mom? Where did you go, mom? And who replaced you? So I'll give one of those. And then I'm going to give one about the Jewish people. So I gave about anti-Semitism, and what is going on with the hatred of Jews today, and Zionism, and the awful, so like, I'm going to, and I'm going to move around. Less of that at a Reform synagogue, because, then you'll get the global, but yeah, some years I've, like I told you last time, I'll give the big vegetarianism sermon, because it's not just that factory farming is bad. It's that our tradition should be the source of understanding why it's bad. Like we invented it first, and like that needs to be voiced. It's not just that it's the latest issue, of the you know uh, on the agenda. um and so anyway, this ended up being a little bit of a class on reform and orthodoxy and conservative, and my big statements about them being, don't study them from a historical point. I mean, we could do history and all of that, but they're really different expressions of authentic Judaism. And one is the focus on the social justice and the, yes, at the expense of ritual, prayer, and observance. Like, it's the social gospel expression of Judaism. But I mean, everything's optional in Reform Judaism. Not everything, most everything. Shabbat observance. What does Shabbat mean to you? You pick Shabbat. Orthodoxy is more like you keep Shabbat like everybody else in this community. And conservative Judaism is what we're talking about, which is, Rabbi, can I use my cell phone on Shabbat? And I'm like, let's look at the law. So this is where I start. I start in the authenticity of the law. The law is electricity is not fire. So then it's in the category of, is it conducive to the spirit of Shabbat or not? And you have a very serious decision to make about that. And you better not lie to yourself. So in the case of the guy I told you, who was like one of my heroes, who helped build up Israel and smuggled arms there when they were about to be massacred, and was 4'0" and tough as nails and mostly just wanted to tell you jokes. His favorite thing about Shabbat was using his cell phone to talk to his daughter, whom he missed terribly because he was an old man living alone. And so I would say that was certainly in the spirit of Shabbat. Does that mean I can use the cell phone willy-nilly? It's a matter of self-honesty. I think probably for most of us, it means putting it aside because we're addicted to it, and not making excuses. But I don't know. I mean, it depends on you. Depends what use you put it to. I think using an electric car on Shabbat is okay, because if it's fully EV and it's not bringing any fuel, so halakhically, I think an electric car is okay. But then you might say, oh, so would you use an electric car to drive across town to see, I don't know, to go see Meg, right? The answer is no. I only use the electric car to go to synagogue and come home, or if there's an urgent situation at the hospital. Well, why not? If it's okay, it's okay, because those uses to me are in the spirit of Shabbat. Now, visiting Meg and spending Shabbat afternoon playing Monopoly sounds great. I have to be careful about whether I have limits on that use of technology. And so for me, so it's a personal decision. So I don't want to use it for that. And that's the case. So in a conservative, what you're going to get is not, look, it's up to you whatever you want to do, or only do it the way, we're going to give you a model. If you want to be like us, be like us. And I'm more like, look, I mean, it's decisions, that I want you to make. And I would like you to take it seriously. That's really the main thing, is here's the law, take it seriously, and find it somewhat binding. And that's why this year I did start with the restrictions on Shabbat rather than just light candles and have people over. I decided this year to kind of focus on, these are real restrictions. There's a reason that we're making space for something amazing. I'm just so into that idea lately, who isn't, which is getting rid of the unnecessary in our lives. Just, we're all just carrying too much. We're carrying too many objects. We're carrying too much debt. We're carrying too much clothes. Some of us are carrying too many friends. You can't carry everything through life. And Shabbat is about removing. Maybe you remove the phone, right? I'm removing running back and forth. I'm removing money. I'm removing, this. I'm removing the news. I'm removing. We have to create a sanctuary for ourselves, like a sanctuary where we can just be alive, and important things aren't spoken except out of the silence. One has to be quiet before one has something worth saying. Even though I've been talking for an hour, so that probably means I'm not saying anything worthwhile. But that's what Shabbat's been for me. So I'm a bit of an introvert, so that when I was single, for all the many years I was single, Shabbat was like, I don't have to worry about what my advisor wants from me. I don't have to worry about what my boss wants from me. I don't have to worry. I don't have to call my mom so she knows I love her. I don't have to do any of it. I didn't use the phone for sure. And I could listen to music. I could walk. I could appreciate nature. I could give my cat the best massage that cat ever had of its life. And then everyone would be like, why do your cats love you and follow you around everywhere? It's like, on Shabbat, I pet them for an hour. Like, I mean, like, they're like, I just need to die right now. I'm in heaven right now, right? But like on a regular week, I do not pet them for more than 5 minutes. Like, so Shabbat was like, this is beautiful world, and I just want to breathe it, and I had Nadav Shabbat, which is I don't want to have to cook chicken and matzo ball soup and put stuff in the crock pot. So I would just have delicious cheese and olives and a good bottle of wine, and a fresh loaf of bread, and dip it in delicious olive oil. And we did that, by the way, last night. We bought everything because I had Friday night off, but we didn't get to it on Friday. So last night we did Nadav Shabbat as a makeup, and Z was like, this is my favorite meal ever. I had like, a dish of fresh pecans, and then a dish of fresh olives. And we just had I cut up special fruits. And so it's like, oh, now it's a piece of mango, and now it's a slice of orange, and now I'm going to have an olive. Now we had 2 different kinds of cheeses, and I had a fresh bread, and we had olive oil to dip in with a little balsamic. And she's like, oh my gosh. And then Lynn's just like, when I met your father, this is what he did every Friday night, and then leftovers on Saturday with a can of tuna. And I'm in heaven. So like, I'm trying to share that heaven with you. That's kind of conservative heaven. I want you to be able to come to synagogue when you feel up for it. I want you to hear a sermon that makes you think about something deep and feels like worth chewing, worth filling your head with for a little while. I want you to meet people maybe you never met before, and sit and have a sandwich when we're not in coronavirus, and watch the kids play. And I want you to be able to go home and take a nap. And so like, that's what I'm trying to share with you from the conservative angle, because you've carved out this spiritual practice in your life. And I want the people in your life to marvel at you and say, Tree, what is up with like this Shabbat thing you're doing, or you've increased, or you've changed? And then, as I've said before, I want them to be like, can I come over? Because that seems like really cool. And can we watch the game? And you're like, no, we cannot watch the game. Like, no, you don't come over if that's what you want to do. But like that I've always found that my non-Jewish friends often like want a piece of it, and they're like, wow, and so that's the kind of Shabbat I'm trying to give you. Remember that it involves lighting candles before dark, if possible. Shouldn't light the candles after dark, but light candles before dark. You make the blessing over the candles, which is worth learning. If at some point you should have a glass of wine or other, if you don't drink alcohol, then something fruit of the vine, some grape juice. And at some point add in the blessing for Kiddush, of sanctification of the day. Very, very important, but it takes a little time to learn it in Hebrew. You can always read it in English. And then you've pre-cooked something. So at that point, just settle in and enjoy. And I wouldn't travel on Friday night. You're not going anywhere. You could have people over. If you're going somewhere, walk. I think it's important, so you're not hustling and bustling. And then Saturday, I'd love it if you came to synagogue or turned us on Zoom. And because I think that putting words in your head that are like, there's a place for silence, but there's a place for mantra. There's a place for and those words are mixed with. I do think the prayers are like, it's like poetry. And when you're praying it right, it's like poetry that you wrote and you forgot that you wrote. And you're like, why did I write that? And then you're like, oh, I get why I wrote that. This is about beauty. This is about love. This is about justice. This is about the hidden light that illuminates everything. So not everyone you have to be like, oh yeah, I wrote that one, but it's like this poetry that's been passed down, and yet sometimes it's like you wrote it yourself. And it's all themes that are not ego-centered. So all the themes of the prayers are like, yeah, the light that's everywhere. It's not your light. It's the holy light. It's remembering that not everyone has been saved from tragedy or from threat, but we as a people have been saved, and so may we save others. Who needs healing? Um, one of the prayers or a couple of them. Where's Israel at these days? Is Israel safe? Is there shalom in Israel? So almost all the prayers are about something other than you, and they're very meditative, and they have beautiful melodies. And then we read scripture, and you're like sitting there being like, I never noticed this line. Why is that line there? So it's like reading an amazing. It's not literature exactly. I mean, you're immersing yourself in the memories of our people. You're basically entering into the Jewish brain, because just as our brains don't really remember, they may for you if you're younger, I don't remember everything accurately. Things blend together, and I have entire years of my life I probably can't remember one thing about. The Torah is like that. It skips generations, it skips years. It says, oh, and then after a long time this happened. But then it's like, but then this thing we remember. And some of the memories are not exactly right, and some of them get enhanced, of course. Suddenly it's like it went from the Egyptians drowned trying to cross with their chariots in the mud to the water stood up in walls and it was completely dry in the middle. Sure, things get a little exaggerated. My mom just told me that I won a spelling bee when I was 5 years old, and no one had ever achieved those heights before. I had to remind her that was something that happened when I was 10, and it wasn't a spelling bee. But it's um, don't want to not think I was a magical legend and prodigy, but I probably really wasn't. And so like things get changed a little bit, but you are entering into the memories of our people. You're just like, it's like you're entering into this communal brain. You're entering into that part that has the memories. That's like the Torah. And they're real memories, by the way. Like I said, sometimes they get enhanced and things like that. But don't get drawn in by foolish people who say things like, well, there was never an exodus from Egypt because we have no archaeological evidence or something like that. Oh, please do not underestimate the foolishness of people who are professors and write books pretending to know everything. Like, trust me, I knew them. They were my friends. They're awfully foolish. They're like the same weird people you went to high school with, and you're like, oh my God, they're a doctor now. I hope I don't get them as my doctor. They're like, oh my God, they're a Bible professor now. Like, I hope people don't believe every word they write about the Bible. So, for example, there were so many exoduses from Egypt of Jewish slaves, like it's hard to keep track of them, and that's historically accurate. Of course, we have memories of being enslaved in Egypt and making it to our homeland of Canaan, and which is now Israel. And so like, you immerse yourself in that, and then you meet people and have lunch, and you learn to meet people at synagogue you've never met before, which again is an anti-ego act. The fact that you're going to sit and talk to someone who may be 85 years old, right? And you're like, what do they have to teach me? They have crumbs on their chin, but I'll be nice. And you do not know what that person looked like when they were 30. Like you want to be invited into their spirit, and then you realize, oh my God, these people who are walking all around, they all have stories, and they're all really interesting. And then suddenly you have friends and people who are excited to know what's going on with you, and you're excited to go on with them, and you have a 50 and 60-year age difference. That's a beautiful thing. That's something a lot of people don't have. And so you eat lunch with them, you meet other people, you go home, preferably take a nap, maybe listen to music, play a little guitar, go for a walk, go for a bike ride, hang out with your cat, just like pretend you're in the Garden of Eden for a little bit. And yeah, there might be bad things going on, but you literally sit there and be like, was the whole world made for me? I mean, oh my God, and yeah, I may be sick, but thank God there's medicine. And thank God there's yes, this is a pretty horrible time to live in. It's also like, maybe this is the best time to ever live in ever, which is a crazy thing to think, because most of the week I'm thinking, I live in the dark ages, is there any future? But then on Shabbat, I'm thinking, that's a little bit narrow-minded, because this may be the best moment and place to ever live in ever. America of 2022? Like, who wouldn't, who in human history might not have traded places with me? So that's Shabbat. And then Shabbat's almost over, and Shabbat's over, and it's Havdalah. You're starving because you foraged all through what you made and had, and you're dying for a pizza or to pick up dabu sushi, and so then it's time for Havdalah, or you're cooking. You turn on your cooking fires, which is the origin of the flame for Havdalah. It initially was your cooking fire. Get the cooking fires going, stuff like that, and you get out the spices for cooking, which is probably the origin of the spices. And then it's time for Havdalah, which is this beautiful ceremony. You turn off all the lights, the fire is lit, you hold up your glass of wine, you get your spices out, and you say a beautiful thing, which says, Hine el Yeshuati avtach v'lo echad, ki aziv zirat Adonai v'hilel Yeshua. Which is you say, Hine means like, it's translated behold, but it's a word that gets you in the moment. Hine means I'm in the moment. Hine, behold, like I'm here, behold, like center. So Hine, El Yeshuati, God of my deliverance. I will head into the future confident and unafraid. And I lift up the cup of deliverance. So you're bringing a little bit of that sense of like gratitude, beauty, really being in the present moment. You're going to bring it into the rest of the world. Hear me okay? Because my Zoom just said you can't hear me. You can, yeah, thanks. And you sniff the spices, like smelling salts, to be like, oh crap, now I've got all this work to do that's due Monday morning. But you're like, but I'm still bringing that spirit of being confident, unafraid, and feeling really grateful for every moment. And I'm going to mix them together. You hold your hands up to the flame. You do a blessing over the wine. You do a blessing over the spices, typically cloves, but you can use any spice, including the spices of your cooking with. And then you see like the differences between the light going through your fingers from the flame, and that's the mixture of the light and the dark that we're mixing into the week, which is the little bit of holiness and gratitude and love, also a little bit of the darkness of challenge, responsibility, anxiety. It's true too, and that's what makes up reality. And then and then the week happens. So that's basically Shabbat. Is there anyone? So anyone would share a little bit about like how they do Shabbat, want to do Shabbat, seen. Eva shared before a little bit about the beauty of Shabbat she's gone to experience with her communities. But is there anybody else that wants to share a little bit about what they like about Shabbat or what they do on Shabbat to make it special? I'm looking around.
For many years before I moved to Michigan, when I lived in Tucson, I actually went to shul on Friday night, and we had food all together, and it was the most beautiful time because everybody had it was a pretty like more orthodox rabbi, and so everybody had their phones off, and there was like none of that allowed. So it was just like probably one of the only times in my life as an adult where we had that type of interaction, right? Like where everybody was just fully present and everybody was having a great time and having community. I really miss that. And yeah, so one of the things that I would like to do moving forward, that I'm trying to set the goal to myself, because as you said, I am also addicted to my phone, like many of us are. So I really want to set that as an intention and a goal to turn off my phone, Friday evening, and then not turn it back again until Saturday evening. So we'll see how that goes.
No, I think that's great. And one thing is, just at a conservative synagogue, including mine, because the issue with the phone and many other things is ruining the spirit of Shabbat, the shalom of Shabbat. It's disturbing the peace, as we say in our English idiom. You don't want to disturb the peace. Therefore, even if your phone doesn't disturb your peace, you may not use it at synagogue. And the only reason I have a phone is only for security. And as Meg knows, I wish I didn't, but required by basically the police in our security practices to keep the phone for the same reason that you understand from the recent attack, hostage situation in Texas. But yes, we have to be very careful that we don't disturb the peace of the community, and so we're extra strict at synagogue in the way we behave. But that's a good point. I wonder, Francine, I'm just a meddler, and In Yiddish, we call it a nudnik. A nudnik is someone's getting your business. Who has no business being there. So I'll be a nudnik, which is, I wonder if there's a way, at least if you're not going cold turkey, to turn off like notifications and things like that, because a lot of disturbing the peace is the sound and the like one of the examples of disturbing the peace in the Talmud is that don't knock on people's doors. Like if you can't tell that they're home and they want to be there, like, because even on the off chance that that's disturbing that you or disturbing to the people next door who are napping, even if the people at that home are expecting you. So it's kind of like that. So Francie, I saw you nodding.
Oh, I already have all my notifications turned off on the regular. Like this is a daily thing that I do. But the problem is not notifications. The problem is that I think, and I speak for myself, but I know for many of my peers as well, we have acquired a very big problem with being bored and just like sitting and not doing anything. And I think that's part of my problem is like I really do enjoy sitting, but then like I spend like 10 minutes sitting doing nothing, and then I'm like start getting really restless. So that's the problem. It's like my go-to is my phone. So I just definitely need to deconstruct that habit, right? And just be okay with being bored, because actually being bored is really good for you, right? Like you get a lot of creativity, and a lot of your mind actually has a lot of time to do its thing instead of being distracted constantly. So it's a really healthy thing, but it's just difficult, I feel like, for my generation and maybe generations after me to just enjoy that boredom and just be in the moment and just sitting there and being and existing.
That's so beautifully said. I mean, for me, I mean, it's really beautifully said. I want to change a word, but I'll say for me, like, that's why, like, listening to music, um, especially like a piece from beginning to end, I can't listen to classical music during the week. I mean, what are you supposed to do? I mean, like, our lives are divided into like 5-minute segments. It's like, I'm not going to listen to like the 2-minute parts of Yo-Yo Ma's like Bach suites or something. So like, if I'm going to put on any classical, it'll only be on Shabbat, and other kinds of things. I I like, so what things, because it is true about boredom, like, so listening to music, going for a walk, uh from, like, it can be very, very nice. I'm hoping that my dad, who's a rabbi, we had very, very traditional Shabbat, but when my brothers were older and they were already gone to college, I was much younger. He used to take me to either like shoot hoops or usually to play tennis at the local park. And it was very meditative. Like it solved the boredom problem because we always had to wait like 2 hours for a court because it was a public park. And we'd sit there and talk. But it would have been very different to be like, Nadav, sit down and stare at the wall. I would have gone nuts. And in fact, that's a debate between the two greatest sages of early Judaism, Hillel and Shammai. Hillel's right, and Meg's nodding. Shammai, who always took the strict position, said if Shabbat is about rest and God rested, you should basically you should lie in bed and sleep as much as you can on Shabbat. And Hillel, who's
I have to agree with him though. The Shabbat
you may be right.
is the best.
You may be right. And that's why we should take the middle way. But Hillel said, no, like, that's not what Shabbat rest is. It's not sleeping. It's like experiencing the world as a kind of Garden of Eden. And so it's like, that's why we light the candles. It's like we're living by candlelight. And that's why we're eating, the eating should be wonderful and the Shabbat treat and all that kind of stuff. So it is a debate, because Hillel's like, don't get bored, have stuff to do. And you can do this, you can do that, and go to synagogue and hear Torah or whatever, and go to friends' houses. And so like, it should be, like Hillel would say, for me, like, I don't really ever want to take a walk. I mean, I'm sorry, I'm just real sedentary. But like Hillel would be like, Nadav, get off your butt and go take a walk. My response back to Hillel, the great sage, would be, wait, I thought Shabbat was supposed to make me feel like I'm in the Garden of Eden. If I were in the Garden of Eden, I would not want to take a walk because I'm perfectly comfortable in my chair. And he'll be like, that's not Shabbat. Get your butt up, make yourself go, because you'll be happier later that you did. And so like Hillel's a little bit more pushy that way, but I'm with you, Meg. It's somewhere in between. I do nap on Shabbat. I just can't stay awake after the day I put in. But it's a pretty wonderful nap, and my cat naps with me, and pretty good times.
I really struggle with resting. Shabbat is a whole thing for me. So I work, well, most people know I'm a workaholic, but I don't work on Friday nights. I don't work on Saturday or Sunday. And the rest of the week I'm working usually like 8 to 8. And during my break, I have my treadmill, so I'll go for a run or something like that during the week. So when the weekends come around, I'm antsy. Like I don't want to be in the house. I don't want to be sitting because I'm sitting all week, doing therapy and all of that. And I'm usually like very like my form of rest is I just need to be away from everyone's emotions for a while because I'm just taking on so much, just in the oncology world. So usually on Saturdays, I'm like, I need to go do something fun. What am I going to do? I will just take off with my car for the whole day and I'm just gone. Friday nights are really challenging also because my friends and I like to do things. I struggle with that. And none of us like to be in the house. I think all of us are kind of, we're all similar in that way. So even this past Friday, I was like, you know what, let's do a Valentine's Day dinner. And we all just got together just to be together and, go out for a little bit. I've tried to have people over, like people are coming over here today, but it's just really, really challenging. Like all I want to do is shop. And if I'm going to get exercise, it's going to be walking around a mall. I don't know. I can't, I have such a hard time sitting. Yesterday, I was tired enough to just kind of relax for the day and kind of, I don't know, just kind of sit with myself, which was nice. Every now and again, I can do that, but I'm just such a busybody on the weekend. So I'm trying to find a balance of what works. But yeah.
So Manisha, first of all, you're like my favorite person in the world. You are amazing. Like, no, really, I'm so glad you said what you said, which is that you're very real and authentic. And by the way, I just want to say, like, I do worry about you because as someone who suffers from compassion fatigue, I don't know how you do what you do. And I mean, like, I have no advice because I'm a crappy patient. So, but like, no, I mean, like, I feel your pain when it comes to carrying other people's emotions. And so that said, you've brought us a very good point, which I may have made before, but I'd like to make again with your permission, which is that if I had to say there was like one huge difference between maybe Orthodoxy, Shabbat, let's say, and other things, kashrut, Jewish practice, and conservative, it's that I think we practice a little bit more of the traditional approach to mitzvot, to commandments, which is take on one thing at a time. We are not binary. So I know I've said, I said in a previous lesson that it's a little different in 2022 because to join, let's say, an Orthodox community would mean to take on a lot of things at once, right? But it was less so in the history of Judaism that the typical thing would be, Manisha, what are you taking on? And so the idea is like, it's a huge amount of stuff. I mean, like, ask Meg, how many people show up for Tisha B'Av? I mean, like, there are holidays that people are completely ignoring. We barely get 10 people. You cannot do everything. No one's doing all the holidays, and that's an easy one. No one's doing all the kashrut. No one's doing all the this. No one's doing all the that. There's no way. You can't do all the praying. You can't do all the social action. You can't do all the self-care. Like, self-care is almost just like another being like, are you doing all this self-care? And I'm like, wait, now it doesn't feel like self-care because it feels like more crap I have to do that makes me feel bad about myself because I'm not getting to it. And I don't feel any better. So I would say that, like, that's why I love this idea of like, yourself. And this is between you and God. Like I would love to be a listener, an advisor. I answer questions like, what was the text say about this? I'd be like, you're not the first person to have that question. And so, and that's nice to know. But like, yourself, like what really could work for you. And so work with it. It really is working with yourself as kind of like material that needs to be shaped and like, and try things, to see like, did that help me feel better or do I feel more drained emotionally and otherwise afterward? And so sometimes it takes trial and error, to know what like really, works and feels good. I think the idea of not going out, like not seeing your friends sounds like a terrible idea, to just stay home and then like maybe invite them over, which is something I was talking about earlier, but that's not necessarily the right thing for you, so I think that working with the fact that you could be like, look, what I'm doing it's not working perfectly, and I need more self-healing. So like, what would be something I take on? You can't be like, Nadav told me to read a book, so I'll sit here and read a book. I mean, you know what I mean? Like, that's not necessarily the thing, but like trying to work with yourself. Sometimes as we get older, it's like what used to work for me, you know, and then trying to go back to that. And then sometimes you touch on that and you're like, it's not working for me anymore. I used to love that, but it's not who I am anymore. And then sometimes it is, you know, sometimes it's like, I'm glad I'm going back to that thing that made me feel good, you know, yoga or, you know, sometimes I think I gave this story before. My wife, when I met her, I would stay home for Shabbat, and I told you she'd go out dancing. And so she eventually gave up the dancing because she liked what I was doing at home. But I don't want to, I want to be authentic. And, you know, I want to be real. What's real is I kind of feel bad that she doesn't go out with her friends and goes dancing. Like, we've lost a piece of something that was beautiful, which is, you know, like, she's someone who's like, you know, I never felt beautiful and I never felt feminine. I was always like called the tomboy and all these kinds of things. And she's like, man, when, you know, when after her car accident and she was having problems, they recommended doing something, you know, and so she picked dancing. She's like, I feel beautiful. Like, I go and I do the tango. She's like, you know, you have no idea what it's like. You're doing the tango with the instructor, and you know, you know, and I put on a dress and I do my hair. So I miss those days, you know. So like, I'd rather you find a Shabbat rather than the rabbi said you can't go dancing, or you know, like that. You figure out what works for you. Now, what worked for her at the time was that she's like, I was going dancing, but I wasn't getting renewed. I didn't have peace. So as I told you, she's like, by giving it up and spending that doing Nadav Shabbat and sitting there and eating almonds and mango and you know whatever wine we chose, and this time it's some kind of weird sour bread he bought, and this time it's a different olive oil. She's like, you know, like it did bring something into her life she didn't have before that was very important. But I also think there was a loss, and so like I don't want to be like that was better than her being with her friends. Like I think that that was you know something that I'm glad she didn't give it up sooner. I'll tell you that that would have been wrong. So I hope that you work with the principles of Shabbat to help you find the, you know, what makes you feel like you know it's worth being alive. You know, it's like really we're really grateful. So and that feels like you're doing something kind of just for you, you know, and not for others. So I really do appreciate, you know, you bringing that up. And I really appreciate Midish. You're always very real and very smart. And so that was very, no, I'm glad you're like, yeah, this whole thing being like, you Nadav, not working for me. I'm like, you know what? I acknowledge that. Like, I can see that totally. Anybody else? So Tim, you've been hanging out with Meg. You have a Shabbat practice?
Right now my Shabbat practice is like getting the candles ready, you know, early. You know, because Meg's so busy. She has to work. So
She has a terrible boss.
Yeah.
So I just don't, you know, right now for me, like I'm like a part owner of my company and I work all the time. Like there's no downtime, and I'm starting another company on top of this now. So the idea of just not working for a period of time is big for me. So that's pretty much what I've been practicing the most, and trying to help Meg as much as I can, whether it's, you know, cooking dinner on those days or helping when I can, but stuff like that.
No, I think that's great. I mean, even if you can't keep the full 25 hours of Shabbat, even just having a period where you could even, you know, designate to your, you know, your co-owner or your co-partner, just like, this is 3 hours where all emails have to go to you or something like that, you know, just to give yourself a break. And so it doesn't have to be all or nothing. And I love the idea, you know, the big part of Shabbat you mentioned, Tim, is because there's so many parts of it, just a lecture on it, I go on forever, is there's something beautiful about prepping. You know, I don't know about you, I'm often eating hand to mouth. My brother, who's was a bachelor for so long after his divorce, I rarely see him. One of my brothers, like, yeah, I finally caught him because like it's on my way to the airport and I stopped by his place leaving Boston. He was eating over the sink. And I was like, dude, you're eating over the sink. And he was like, oh crap, now you know what I mean? And I was like the idea that you prep for something for yourself and then you can sit and just enjoy it. Like prep is, I don't know about for you guys, like I'm not the person with the, I don't have the bread starter at home, and I'm not the person who preps 3 hours in advance. You know, I'm eating hand to mouth a lot of the time. So like that, just that idea that if all you did, Tim, was like prep for a meal, you know, so that when you have the meal, you can just enjoy it. You know, those little things are just really, really big. So I appreciate, and the candles are really big. I love that. So Tree, do you want to share anything? It doesn't have to be something you're already doing, but something that you feel like is renewing to you, a part that matches Shabbat.
Yeah, I mean, I'm still kind of figuring out all of what it means for me, especially as a college student without like too much community, because for me, a big renewing thing is like getting to be social and connect with people in my community. And so sometimes I really get to do that, and it's awesome because I will be able to go and spend time with my Hillel friends and go and like have Shabbat with them and connect and, you know, stay there for the night and just get to be with friends that way and connect that way. But on nights that were separate, I'm still kind of figuring out what exactly everything means for me. Um, but one thing that I have done already is I was able to set specific limits of like, okay, we are done working during this time, because I have a boss who will just like reach out to me like, hey, I have a quick question. Hey, I have a quick question, and will like quick question me to death, no matter the time or the weekend or, you know, when it is, because I work in an HR kind of department, so it's not like shift managed. Like they can just like reach out to you like that. And so I've been able to set the boundary of like, hey, this is a religious observance. So, you know, after this time on Friday until this time on Saturday, I'm not going to be taking your questions anymore or be able to help you or make these differences, because it's just not something that I can manage and still be able to keep this overall spirit of rest, not changing, not having to have all of that stuff going on, if that makes sense.
That makes beautiful sense. I'm so sorry. I mean, I feel like all of us have this now, which is, I just have a quick question. Everybody thinks like, and it's just, don't you realize, you know, you're giving me a ton of them, or it just feels like the alarm's always going off, you know? And I also want to affirm what you said, which is, I'm giving you a perspective of like what it was like for me to keep Shabbat when I'm 30 or 40 or 50. But especially in the last couple of years, we've all been so isolated that Shabbat, especially on like campus, you know, it is about having a community. It's about being with other people, you know. And so I'm really glad you get that and I'm sorry you haven't gotten it more given some of the restrictions. But that's extraordinarily, no, that's very, very helpful. I mean, it is about boundaries, you know. I mean, people outside of religions are always very skeptical of boundaries, but I mean, a life without boundaries, too many of us are experiencing them. Like there's a reason for boundaries: time boundaries, space boundaries, work and not work boundaries, for sure. Thanks. Is there anyone else who would like to share anything about their Shabbat? And if not, I'll probably close the class with a quotation.
Yeah, sure. So I'm still trying to figure out how I'm observing Shabbat because I do live in Ipsy. I did ask the question about driving a car that doesn't have electric capabilities. I mean, I just got the car last year, so I'm just like, I don't want to have to go and like worry about getting another one. But so what I do on Shabbat most of the time is I'll either go to Hillel or I'll go to like the Jewish Resource Center or something. I like JRC's food a little bit better. They serve cholent, which I'm just always down for. And I'll go and like spend time with people. Like I tend to spend more time with undergrads than I do with grad students because I feel like they're more my age. Still, I'm like straight out of undergrad. And then like after, if I'm at the JRC or something, we go to like the O Minion has like a little gathering after, which is really fun. So we'll go there and just talk about whatever. And then on Saturdays is when I'm less like kind of active. I kind of sleep in a lot. Or I'll make sure to pet my cat for like an hour. And I have 2 cats, so it's like 2 hours now. And
And then it's dark. I mean,
yeah, and then it's dark. But no, I'm trying to do more things like at least on Saturdays, like Saturday like afternoon services or something. I met Shoshana at yeah, and they were like, oh, why don't you come to the Saturday services? And so I'm like trying to get myself to get to that point, but I feel like after Friday it's like the energy of seeing people is a little drained. So the hard thing is trying to navigate graduate school work, and like having ADHD doesn't really help with time management and these things too. So it's hard. So I've been like reading, I pick out and choose things that I can read like on Shabbat that are ones like, okay, so this is interesting. It's about like student development theory. That's interesting to me. I'll read that. Or like I'll read a case about like religious and higher ed law because I find that really fascinating. And so I'll do that, and it might be for class, but I won't take notes on it. I'll just like read it, but then I'll feel like less behind and things, but also like reading so then I can also have time to gel and process and not really like I end up rereading it again for class with notes later, but
right.
it's like at least I'll be able to like actively participate later. But on Shabbat, it's like it's helped me at least maintain the spirit of Shabbat, where I'm not like stressing out so much about school, where I'm like doing things I enjoy, but then also like feeling like I'm not just drowning in schoolwork. And I don't think that you should feel like you're drowning in schoolwork on Shabbat too. Like I have a friend who's modern Orthodox, and she has kept Shabbat like all 4 years I knew her in undergrad. And I asked her how she does that. She keeps like Orthodox Shabbat, and she's like, time management is incredible. Like, and I was like, man, I wish I had those skills right now. So I think my goal would be to eventually be able to just like not be so caught up that I can truly enjoy the days. I don't know. Sometimes I'll go to Ann Arbor and just like walk around. I kind of don't really put that restriction of not driving on myself, given that I live in Pittsfield Township where there's literally nothing, like nothing to do. So I don't know. Maybe I'll go to the movie theater or something. Who knows?
I think you have a really rich Shabbat practice. And I agree with you. I just feel like when it comes to driving, like I said, I just don't think people should need to feel they need to take on everything at once. In the conservative movement, we think it's official that we think it's okay to drive to synagogue and drive home.
Yeah.
But we are officially against other driving because we're worried that the boundary would,
yeah. Well, I want to drive to like campus and then walk around. Like I walk around the law, like on Saturdays, it's pretty much like a kind of a ritual now for me to like walk around the law quad as the sun is like, it's like an hour and a half or something before sunset. So I walk around for like 30 minutes and then I go back and then I do like, and then I do the Havdalah and all of that. And I mean, it's just nice to be able to like see kind of how nature is interacting with especially in my world, like academia and stuff too. Is like the university unfortunately doesn't shut down on Saturdays. It's like, but in my head, I kind of shut down on Saturdays, so it's good.
No, it sounds like you have a really rich practice. And I think it's important not to just I think it's important not to just stay at home. I mean,
my apartment would be so boring to walk around in.
Yeah, exactly. So, I mean, it would be the Shammai thing, like, oh, stay in bed, you'll feel better. But that's not exactly like the world was made for me. And it's not exactly renewing. Or, I think that human contact is really, really important.
Yeah. Like I encourage anyone to, like, if they know people who are like Orthodox or anything too, like like if you mention that you're interested in going to like a Shabbat too, like kind of doing an immersion Shabbat is really fun. Like that's what I did, at least. So like a Shabbaton, and I know like I'm gonna reach out to some of the families later to be like, hey, can I do like Shabbat with you sometime? Just to be able to like truly like remove myself from technology, from anything too. And I mean, I thought it was really fun. The food is always good. So.
No, thank you for sharing that. That's excellent. It's a really good practice. Okay, so what I'm going to do is I'm going to close with a quote. One thing's on the syllabus was Abraham Joshua Heschel's The Sabbath. I very much encourage it. I know it's worth more than 4 minutes, but and so I'm going to read a little bit from The Sabbath. his main point, it's the most important conservative Jewish statement on the Sabbath ever made, and even though it was whatever it was more than half a century ago. Um, it's the main text on the Sabbath in conservative Judaism. And what he basically says, and it's really deep, is that there are two dimensions to existence. There's having and there's being. And that a little bit like what we mean by being in the present moment. But that, so like we construct our worlds and our personalities by what we have. And you have an education, I have a cat, I have a spouse, I have a this, I have a house, whatever it is. And our world is a consumer world, and it's built around the profanity or sacredness of objects. And in Christianity, for example, to be with God is to be in a cathedral, and so it's about the space. It's like, and he's like, Judaism is completely undermining that by saying that the dimension of God is not a dimension of space, and the dimension of being with God is not to be around the right objects or to be the right object, or to be in a certain place. It is to be in holy time. And what holy time is it's to be fully present. It's to be. It's to experience the realm of being rather than the realm of having. And so that what Shabbat is a temple in time. And that concept is very, very serious, because it means the holidays are temples. Like, it means that the place where your soul lives is time. And that the dimension of God in our lives is the dimension of time, past, present, and future. Our very personalities are narratives, they're stories. Story is time. It's being in time is a story. Uh, and that's who we are. That's what our personality is. It's where our spirit and soul are. They're sparks that are existing in time. Memories, present moment, our dreams, concerns, mission, and purpose, which is about future, and intersecting them, and then living within these. So you're not living in a space, you're living in time, you're building these temples in time: Shabbat, Yom Kippur, Rosh Hashanah, Sukkot, Passover, and that these are like stops on your journey. So he says, among other things, he always wrote with he, and I know that's not very inclusive. So I'll say, the one who wants to enter the holiness of the day must first lay down the profanity of clattering commerce, of being yoked to toil. They must go away from the screech of dissonant days, from the nervousness and fury of acquisitiveness, and the betrayal and embezzling their own life. They must say farewell to manual work and learn to understand that the world has already been created and survive without their help. 6 days a week we wrestle with the world, wringing profit from the earth, but on Shabbat we care for the seed of eternity planted in the soul. The world has our hands, but our soul belongs to someone else. 6 days a week we seek to dominate the world. On the seventh day we try to dominate the self. To set apart one day of freedom, a day on which we would not use the instruments which have been so easily turned into weapons of destruction. A day of being with ourselves, a day of detachment from the vulgar, of independence of external obligations, a day on which we stop worshiping the idols of technical civilization, a day of armistice in the economic struggle with our fellow human and the forces of nature. Is there any institution that holds out greater hope for the progress of the human species than the Sabbath? Jewish ritual may be characterized as the art of significant forms in time. Jewish ritual is an architecture of time. Most of its observances, Shabbat, Rosh Chodesh, the new moon, the festivals, the holidays, and the Jubilee year and the sabbatical year depend on a certain hour of the day or season of the year. It is, for example, the evening, morning, or afternoon that brings with it the call to prayer. The main themes of faith lie in the realm of time. We remember the day of the Exodus from Egypt, the day when Israel stood at Sinai, and our messianic hope is the expectation of a day, of the end of days. I will close with one mental exercise. Which of the following does not belong, which is not like the others? And there's a particular answer. This is like a crossword question. I know there are many answers, but only one fits. Day, week, month, year. Which one is different than the rest? Day, week, month, year. A day, the concept of a day, the architecture of the day is based around a cosmic event. The rise and fall of the sun, or how, wherever you want to start, or the sunrise to sunrise. A month is based on the moon. That's why it's called the month. A year is based on a cosmic event as well. The week is not. The week is not based on any cosmic event. It is an introduction from the Bible. It is an introduction by humans into the architecture of time. So it is what we build within that structure, that we add to it. And so it's a little bit different than, it's not just following nature, it's building something within it. It's our addition to it. And it is our holy rhythm. It's a rhythm not only of days, it becomes a rhythm of years. No debt, according to the Bible, can go for more than 6 years, because the seventh year is going to be the year of release. Land has to be left fallow after 6 years so that it can rest for a full year. So 7 is the holy number of a rhythm that is the spiritual rhythm of living things to be connected into the architecture of time. And so the Shabbat is the main sign of the covenant with God. We'll meet in 2 weeks. I know I said we started this week, but I really didn't think we'd get to it. But we really will now. So is kashrut. And I'll do my best not to get mired down in the details, but we'll do like we did with Shabbat. I'll start off. So we have the reading from To Be a Jew. Start off with things like what is forbidden to eat and what is permitted by the Torah. Then I'll say what is forbidden and permitted to eat by the Talmud. And then there's actually a lot of leeway in Jewish law, which you're not expected to master. But then I'll try to break out for you, which is that kashrut has the most wide range of acceptable practices, probably of any area of Jewish law. So it is definitely not, does it have a hechsher and does it not have a hechsher? It's a lot more complicated than that. And hopefully we'll get into that third area, which is actually is the stuff that faces us every day. Not every day does someone, you need to eat this piece of shrimp or bacon, but actually every day we run into other things like, can I have a slice of that pizza or not? So, and we will talk about all that next time. So we'll get into kashrut. Thanks for everyone for joining us. And we'll talk more in 2 weeks. Take care. Shavuot